I arrived at Cades Cove Ranger Station on a Tuesday in late October, 3 hours before my first overnight shift. The drive from Knoxville had taken longer than I'd planned. Road work on 441, then a wrong turn near Townsend that cost me 40 minutes. I needed this job. My father's medical bills had piled up through the summer, and the Park Service paid better than anything else I could find with my forestry degree half finished. The station sat at the edge of the cove, a low stone building with green shutters and a metal roof that had gone orange with rust at the seams. Behind it, the mountains rose in layers of gray and deeper gray under a sky that threatened rain. I could smell wood smoke and wet leaves. Inside, a woman named Cartwright was waiting. She was maybe 50, in with short gray hair and a ranger uniform that looked like it had been ironed that morning. She shook my hand once, firm, and gestured to a metal desk near the back wall. "You're Harris," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Your background check cleared. You start tonight. Overnight rotation, Wednesday through Sunday, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. You'll patrol the cove perimeter, monitor the radio, and maintain the equipment log. Pay is deposited every other Friday. Questions so far?" "No, ma'am." She opened a drawer and pulled out a ring with 12 keys on it. Each key had a small piece of tape with a number written in black marker. She set the ring on the desk between us. "These are for the gates, the storage shed, the restrooms, the maintenance building, and the interior doors here at the station. Memorize which is which by tomorrow night. If you lose them, replacement is $200 out of your first check." I picked up the ring. The keys were cold and heavier than I expected. Cartwright pulled a laminated map from the same drawer and unfolded it on the desk. The cove was an oval, roughly 11 miles around the loop road. She tapped a red dot on the east side. "This is the station. You'll do a full perimeter check twice per shift, once at 11:30 p.m., once at 3:15 a.m. No exceptions to those times. The loop road is one way. You take the truck, not your personal vehicle. Drive at 15 miles per hour, no faster. You'll stop at each of these 6 points." She circled them in pencil. Abrams Creek Pullout, Methodist Church, the Primitive Baptist Church, the Cooper Road Junction, the Overlook, and the Cable Mill area. At each stop, you get out. You walk 20 yards in from the road, listen for 2 full minutes, then return to the truck and mark the time in the log. Bring a watch that works. "What am I listening for?" She looked at me for a moment, and I couldn't read her expression. "Anything that doesn't belong. You'll know it when you hear it." I nodded, though I didn't understand. She folded the map and handed it to me, then pulled out a binder with a blue cover. Inside were printed pages in plastic sleeves, maybe 30 pages total. "These are your operational guidelines. Read them tonight before your shift. Some of them will seem strange. Follow them anyway. Every word. If you think a rule doesn't make sense, follow it harder. Is this about wildlife management? It's about staying safe and keeping the station secure. That's all you need to know." She stood. "Son, your locker is number 7. Code is 4921. Change it if you want. The radio is a Motorola on channel 6. It stays on channel 6. If anyone tries to reach you on another channel, do not respond. If the dispatcher calls you by your first name, respond. If she calls you by your last name, do not respond. Write that down if you need to." I wrote it in the margin of the map. "The bathroom here at the station is through that door," she continued, pointing to a narrow hallway. "Use it before your shift starts and after your shift ends. Do not use it between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. There's a portable facility behind the maintenance building if you need it during the night. It's marked with a green X on your map. Why can't I use the one inside? Because that's the rule." She walked me through the rest of the station. The break room with a microwave and a small refrigerator, the storage closet with boxes of batteries and road flares, the equipment log on a clipboard hanging near the front door. Then she took me outside to see the truck, a white Ford Ranger with the Park Service seal on the door. It smelled like gasoline and old coffee. "Tank should be 3/4 full. If it drops below half, refill it at the pump behind the maintenance building. Key number 8. She checked her watch. I'm off at 6. Your shift starts at 10. Be here at 9:45 to do your pre-shift check. Any questions? Should I expect to see anyone else out here at night? No. If you do see someone, do not approach them. You note the time, the location, and their appearance in the log. Then continue your route. If they try to speak to you, do not answer. If they follow you, drive to the station, lock the doors, and radio the dispatcher on Channel 6. Do not leave the truck to confront anyone. Understood? Yes, ma'am. She handed me the binder. Read it. All of it. I'll see you tomorrow night to check your first log. Then she got into a gray Jeep and drove off, leaving me standing in the gravel lot with 12 keys, a map, and a binder full of rules I hadn't yet read. I went back inside and sat at the desk. The station was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the break room. Through the window, I could see the mountains darkening as the clouds moved lower. I opened the binder, and the first page was titled in typed letters, Cades Cove Overnight Operational Guidelines. Below that, in smaller print, for Ranger use only, do not remove from station. I turned the page. The rules were numbered 1 through 14, each printed in the same plain font. 1. Arrive at the station no later than 9:45 p.m. Conduct a visual inspection of all windows and doors. If any window is open, close it and lock it. If any door is unlocked, lock it. If the front door is already locked when you arrive and you did not lock it, radio the dispatcher immediately and wait in your personal vehicle until she confirms you may enter. 2. At exactly 10 p.m., turn on the exterior floodlights using the switch near the front door. Leave them on until 6 a.m. If the lights go out during your shift, wait 5 minutes. And if they do not come back on, replace the bulbs from the storage closet. If they go out again after replacement, leave them off and do not attempt further repairs. 3. The radio must remain on Channel 6 at all times. If you hear voices on Channel 6 that do not identify themselves as Park Service dispatch, do not respond. If you hear your own voice on the radio, turn the volume to 0 and do not adjust it until 6 a.m. 4. Between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., do not use the interior bathroom. Use the portable facility behind the maintenance building. If you see light coming from under the bathroom door during your shift, do not open the door. Note the time in the log and continue your duties. 5. Conduct your first perimeter patrol at 11:30 p.m. Drive the loop road at 15 miles per hour. Stop at each of the 6 designated points. Walk 20 yards from the road and listen for 2 full minutes. If you hear footsteps that stop when you stop walking, return to the truck immediately and continue to the next checkpoint. Do not investigate. 6. At each checkpoint, verify the time on your watch before you begin listening. If your watch shows a time earlier than the last checkpoint, reset it to the correct time and skip that checkpoint. Proceed directly to the next one. 7. If you see a person standing in the road during your patrol, slow to 5 miles per hour but do not stop. If the person waves at you, do not wave back. If the person speaks to you through the window, do not answer. If the person is wearing a Park Service uniform, note their appearance in the log but do not acknowledge them. 8. If you encounter an animal on the road, you stop the truck and wait for it to move. Do not honk the horn. Do not exit the truck. If the animal approaches the truck, turn off the headlights and wait in silence until it leaves. If the animal circles the truck 3 times, start the engine and drive forward slowly. Do not look at the animal as you pass. 9. At 3:15 a.m., conduct your second perimeter patrol using the same procedures as the first. If you are delayed for any reason and cannot begin the patrol by 3:20 a.m., skip the patrol entirely and remain at the station until 6 a.m. 10. Between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., check the equipment log. Count the number of road flares in the storage closet. The count should match the number written in the log from the previous shift. If the count is lower, note the discrepancy, but do not add new flares. And if the count is higher, remove the extra flares and place them in the metal bin outside the back door. 11. If you hear knocking on the station door between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., do not answer it. If the knocking continues for more than 1 minute, move to the break room and close the door. Wait there until the knocking stops. If the knocking stops and then resumes, ignore it. 12. Do not open the blinds on the north-facing window at any time during your shift. If the blinds are open when you arrive, close them immediately. If you see a face in the window before you close the blinds, note the time in the log and proceed with your shift. Do not look at the window again until 6 a.m. 13. If the dispatcher radios you and addresses you by your last name, do not respond. If she addresses you by your first name, respond with your employee number only. If she asks you a question that requires more than your employee number, respond with confirmed or negative. Do not provide additional information. 14. At 6 a.m., turn off the exterior floodlights. Complete the equipment log. Lock all doors and windows. If you see another ranger arriving before 6 a.m., do not leave the station until 6 a.m. If no ranger arrives by 6:15 a.m., lock the station and leave. Do not wait longer than 15 minutes. I read the list twice, then I read it again. Some of the rules made sense. Locking doors, checking equipment, following patrol routes. Others felt arbitrary. Why couldn't I use the bathroom? Why did it matter if someone waved at me? What was I supposed to hear during those 2-minute listening periods? I turned the page, expecting clarification, but the next page was blank except for a handwritten note in blue ink. Follow every rule exactly as written. Do not improvise, do not test the boundaries. If you survive your first week, you'll understand why. The handwriting was hurried, the letters cramped together. I checked the time. It was 6:30. I had 3 hours before my shift started. I went outside and walked the perimeter of the station, counting my steps. The building was small, maybe 40 feet on each side. The north-facing window was narrow and high, positioned above a tangle of rhododendron bushes. The blinds were closed. I tried to see through the gap at the bottom, but it was too dark inside. Behind the station, I found the maintenance building, a shed with a corrugated metal roof and a padlock on the door. Key number 9, and inside were shelves of supplies, coils of rope, cans of paint, a toolbox, and a plastic bin labeled salt. On the floor were 5-gallon water jugs, 4 of them full. The portable facility was 10 yards past the shed, a green plastic box with a white door. I opened it to make sure it was functional. It smelled like chemicals and pine needles. I walked back to the station and sat in my car until 9:30, reading the rules one more time. The sun had set, and the mountains were gone, replaced by a solid wall of black. There were no streetlights here, no houses, no traffic. The only light came from the station windows. At 9:40, I went inside and began my pre-shift check. All the windows were closed and locked. I tested each one, and the front door had been unlocked when I arrived. I'd used my key to open it, so I didn't need to radio the dispatcher. I found the switch for the floodlights near the door and flipped it at exactly 10 p.m., watching the gravel lot outside turn bright white. The radio was already on, set to channel 6. I heard static, then a woman's voice. "Cades Cove Station, this is dispatch, radio check." I picked up the handset. My employee number was written on a sticker on the radio base, 4732. 4732, I said. Confirmed. Have a quiet shift, Harris. She'd used my last name. I set the handset down without responding. The next 90 minutes passed slowly. I reviewed the map, memorized the 6 checkpoint locations, and filled out the equipment log header with the date and my employee number. At 11:15, I put on my jacket and went outside to the truck. The air was colder than I'd expected. I could see my breath. I started the engine and let it warm up for 2 minutes, then began the loop road at 15 miles per hour. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the dark. On either side, the trees pressed close, their branches reaching over the road. I passed the first checkpoint, Abrams Creek pullout, at 11:28. I parked, checked my watch, and got out. The creek was 20 yards to my left. I walked toward it, counting my steps. At 20, I stopped and stood still. I listened. Water moving over rocks, wind in the trees, something rustling in the leaves, maybe a raccoon or a possum. I counted to 120, 2 full minutes, then walked back to the truck and marked the time in the log, 11:31 p.m. On the second checkpoint was the Methodist church, a white clapboard building with a cemetery behind it. I parked at 11:41, walked 20 yards toward the cemetery and listened. Nothing, just wind. I returned to the truck and continued. The Primitive Baptist Church, the Cooper Road Junction, the Overlook, the cable mill. At each stop I followed the same procedure, 20 yards, 2 minutes, back to the truck. I saw no animals, no people, no movement except the trees swaying in the wind. I finished the patrol at 12:37 a.m. and drove back to the station. Inside, I poured myself coffee from the pot I'd made earlier and sat at the desk. The radio hissed softly. The floodlights hummed. The station was warm and bright, and I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. Maybe the rules were just precautions, and maybe nothing ever happened here. At 2 a.m., I went to the storage closet to count the flares. There were 18 arranged in 2 rows on the second shelf. I checked the equipment log from the previous shift. The count matched, 18. I wrote 18 in the log next to the current date and returned to the desk. At 2:23 a.m., I heard knocking. It came from the front door, 3 slow, evenly spaced knocks. I stood up and looked at the door. Through the window beside it, I could see the gravel lot, empty and bright under the floodlights. No car, no person. The knocking came again. 3 knocks. Same rhythm. I thought about Rule 11. Do not answer it. I stayed at the desk. My hand was on the radio handset, but I didn't pick it up. The knocking continued. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more knocks. And it went on for 45 seconds. I counted, and then it stopped. I waited. My pulse was loud in my ears. The knocking did not resume. I sat down and wrote in the log, 2:23 a.m., knocking at front door. Duration approximately 45 seconds. Did not answer. Knocking ceased. I checked the windows. I checked the locks. Everything was secure. At 3:15 a.m., I started my second patrol. The loop road was darker now, or maybe I was just more tired. I stopped at Abrams Creek, walked my 20 yards and listened. Water, wind, rustling. Then I heard footsteps. They were behind me to my right, moving through the leaves. I stopped walking. The footsteps stopped. I started walking toward the truck. The footsteps started again, matching my pace exactly. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I didn't turn around, and I walked quickly back to the truck, got in, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I wrote in the log, 3:19 a.m., Abrams Creek checkpoint. Footsteps ceased when I ceased movement. Returned to truck per Rule 5. I continued to the Methodist church. No footsteps this time. I finished the patrol at 4:21 a.m. and returned to the station. The rest of the shift was quiet. I drank more coffee. I checked the equipment log twice. I did not hear knocking. I did not see light under the bathroom door. At 6 a.m., I turned off the floodlights, completed the log, and locked the station. Cartwright arrived at 6:10. She looked at the log, nodded once, and told me to go home. I drove back to Knoxville in silence, the rules cycling through my mind. I worked Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Yet each night followed the same pattern. Pre-shift check, 2 patrols, equipment count, coffee, log entries. I heard knocking twice more. I heard footsteps at Abrams Creek 3 more times. On Friday, I saw a deer standing in the road near the cable mill. It watched me as I approached, then turned and walked into the trees. Its movements were normal. I noted the time in the log and continued. On Sunday night, I found a revised page slipped into the binder. It was titled Amendment to Operational Guidelines and dated 2 days earlier. The handwriting was Cartwright's, 15. If you see a child on the loop road between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., do not stop. Do not speak to the child. Drive past at 5 miles per hour. If the child follows the truck, do not look in the rearview mirror. Continue to the next checkpoint and proceed as normal. Shilu. And if the floodlights begin to flicker, count the number of flickers. If the count is even, ignore it. If the count is odd, go outside and stand under the lights for 1 full minute, then return inside. Do not look at the woods while you are outside. 17. If you find an item that does not belong to the station, clothing, tools, food, photographs, place it in the metal bin outside the back door. Do not examine it closely. Do not bring it inside. 18. If the radio emits a high-pitched tone lasting longer than 10 seconds, turn the volume to 0 and leave it there for the remainder of your shift. Do not attempt to adjust the channel. 19. Between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., check the north-facing window from outside the station. If the blinds are open, close them from the outside if possible. If they cannot be closed from the outside, you do not enter the station. Radio the dispatcher and wait in the truck until 6 a.m. 20. If you complete both patrols without incident and return to the station to find the front door unlocked, do not enter. Radio the dispatcher and wait in the truck until she confirms you may proceed. I read the amendments twice, then place the page back in the binder. On Monday, my day off, I called my father. He asked how the job was going. I told him it was fine, just overnight patrols and paperwork. He said he was glad I'd found something steady. I didn't tell him about the rules. On Tuesday, I went to the library in Knoxville and searched for information about Cades Cove. I found books about the settlers who'd lived there in the 1800s, about the churches and the mills, about the Park Service acquiring the land in the 30s. I found nothing about strange occurrences, no folklore about things in the woods, no reports of missing rangers. I returned to work on Wednesday night. Cartwright was waiting for me at the station. She handed me a new key ring with 13 keys instead of 12. Key 13 is for the northwest gate, she said. You'll need it starting tonight. At 1:45 a.m., drive to the northwest gate and unlock it. Leave it unlocked until 2:15 a.m., then lock it again. Do not exit the truck while the gate is unlocked. If you see anyone or anything pass through the gate during that window, note it in the log, but do not follow. What's the gate for? It's a maintenance access point. Why does it need to be unlocked at night? She looked at me with the same unreadable expression she'd worn during my first briefing. Yeah, because that's the schedule. Follow it. She left and I began my shift. At 1:45 a.m., I drove to the northwest gate. It was a chain-link barrier set back from the loop road, half hidden by overgrown brush. I unlocked it with key 13 and pushed it open, then returned to the truck and waited. The gate faced a narrow dirt path that led into the woods. I couldn't see more than 10 feet down the path, even with the truck's headlights on. At 1:52 a.m., I saw movement. Something was walking down the path toward the gate. It was tall and upright, moving with a slow, deliberate gait. I turned off the headlights. In the dark, I could still see the shape. It passed through the gate and turned left, moving parallel to the loop road. I couldn't make out details, just a silhouette, human-sized, walking steadily, and it disappeared into the trees. I waited until 2:15 a.m., then got out of the truck, locked the gate, and returned to the station. I wrote in the log, 1:52 a.m., tourism figure observed passing through northwest gate. Humanoid shape. Did not follow per instructions. At 3:15 a.m., I started my second patrol. At the Abrams Creek checkpoint, I heard footsteps again. This time they were louder, closer. I returned to the truck immediately. At the Methodist church, I heard nothing. At the Primitive Baptist church, I heard singing. It was faint, coming from inside the church, a woman's voice, or maybe several voices harmonizing on a hymn I didn't recognize. The words were indistinct, but the melody was slow and mournful. I stood 20 yards from the church and listened for my 2 minutes. The singing continued, and never growing louder or softer. I returned to the truck and noted it in the log. At the Cooper Road junction, I saw a man standing beside the road. He was wearing a ranger uniform, the same green and gray as mine. He was facing away from me, looking toward the mountains. I slowed to 5 miles per hour and drove past him. As I passed, he turned his head to watch me. I didn't wave. I didn't stop. In the rearview mirror, I saw him step onto the road and stand in the center of it, still watching. I continued to the overlook. At 4:38 a.m., the floodlights flickered. I counted. 7 flickers, then they stabilized. 7 was odd. I put on my jacket and went outside. The air was sharp and cold. I stood under the floodlights and counted to 60, keeping my eyes on the gravel at my feet. I didn't look at the woods. When I reached 60, I went back inside. The rest of the shift was quiet. At 6 a.m., Cartwright arrived and reviewed the log. She paused at my entry about the figure at the northwest gate. "Did it acknowledge you?" she asked. "No." "Did it move toward the truck?" "No." She nodded and closed the log. "Good. You followed the procedure." She handed me another amendment sheet. 21. If you hear your name called from outside the station, do not answer. If the voice persists, turn on the radio and increase the volume until the voice is no longer audible. 22. If you see 2 of the same animal at a checkpoint, 2 deer, 2 raccoons, 2 bears, leave the checkpoint immediately. Do not complete the 2-minute listening period. Proceed to the next checkpoint. 23. If the temperature inside the station drops below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, I check the thermostat. If the thermostat is set correctly and the temperature continues to drop, light 3 road flares and place them in the metal bucket near the back door. Leave them burning until the temperature stabilizes. 24. If you encounter fog during your patrol, drive through it at 10 miles per hour. Do not stop. If the fog is too dense to see the road, turn on the hazard lights and proceed at 5 miles per hour until visibility improves. 25. If the clock on the wall shows a different time than your watch, trust your watch. Do not adjust the clock. I worked the rest of the week. I unlocked the northwest gate each night at 1:45 a.m. Twice I saw the tall figure pass through. Once, I saw nothing. The singing at the Primitive Baptist Church became a regular occurrence. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, and always the same slow hymn. On Saturday, I saw a child. She was standing at the edge of the road near the cable mill wearing a white dress that seemed to glow in the headlights. She looked about 8 years old. Her hair was long and dark. I slowed to 5 miles per hour and drove past her without stopping. In the rearview mirror, I saw her step onto the road and start walking after the truck. She moved quickly, almost running, but her steps were silent. I didn't look at the mirror again. I continued to the station and completed my shift. On Sunday night, the radio emitted a high-pitched tone at 11:53 p.m. I counted the seconds. The tone lasted 18 seconds. I turned the volume to 0 and left it there until 6 a.m. At 3:15 a.m. during my second patrol, I stopped at the overlook and walked my 20 yards. The overlook faced east, toward a ridge that separated the cove from the rest of the park. I stood still and listened. I heard footsteps, not behind me, ahead of me, coming from the direction of the ridge. They were slow and rhythmic, like someone walking a measured pace. Then I heard a second set of footsteps matching the first, then a third. I counted. 6 sets of footsteps, all moving in perfect synchronization, all coming closer. I walked back to the truck and marked the time in the log. 3:21 a.m. Overlook checkpoint. Multiple footsteps approaching from east. Return to truck per Rule 5. By the end of my second week, I had memorized every rule. I knew the patrol route by heart. I could count to 120 without losing track, even when I was exhausted. I started bringing protein bars and extra coffee. And I bought a better flashlight. I replaced the batteries in my watch. I stopped trying to rationalize the rules. On my third Monday, I met another ranger. His name was Poke. He was in his late 20s, tall and thin, with a patchy beard and tired eyes. He worked the overnight shift on Mondays and Tuesdays, the 2 nights I had off. We overlapped for 15 minutes on Wednesday evening while Cartwright was running through some supply orders. Poke was filling out his equipment log at the desk, and I was checking my key ring before my shift. "You're the new guy," he said. "Yeah, Harris." "Poke, you doing okay out here?" "So far." He nodded slowly, not looking up from the log. "You follow the rules?" "Everyone." "Good. Keep doing that. He paused, then added, I worked 5 nights without reading the binder. Thought it was just bureaucracy. I lost a week of sleep after that. What happened? He closed the log and stood up. Nothing I want to talk about. Just follow the rules. He left and I didn't see him again for 2 weeks. On my 4th Wednesday, I found a new amendment in the binder, 26. If you hear scratching on the roof of the station, do not investigate. Note the time and duration in the log. If the scratching lasts longer than 5 minutes, go to the break room and close the door until it stops. 27. If you see boot prints in the gravel lot that were not there during your pre-shift check, measure the stride length. If the stride is longer than 4 feet, radio the dispatcher immediately. Do not follow the prints. 28. If the phone in the break room rings, do not answer it. The phone is not connected to any line. The phone rang on Thursday night at 12:41 a.m. I was at the desk, writing in the log, when I heard it, a shrill, old-fashioned bell sound coming from the break room. I stood up and looked through the doorway. The phone was a beige rotary model mounted on the wall. It rang 6 times, then stopped. I noted it in the log and continued my shift. On Friday, the scratching started. It began at 10:37 p.m., just after I'd turned on the floodlights. It sounded like claws or fingernails dragging across metal, moving from the front of the roof toward the back. I noted the time. I watched the second hand on my watch. The scratching lasted 2 minutes and 18 seconds, then stopped. I wrote it in the log and continued. At 1:45 a.m., I drove to the northwest gate. I unlocked it, returned to the truck, and waited. At 1:56 a.m., I saw 3 figures walking down the path. They moved in single file, evenly spaced, each about 6 feet tall. They passed through the gate and turned left just like the others. I turned off the headlights and waited in the dark. At 2:15 a.m., I locked the gate and returned to the station. During my second patrol, I encountered fog. It rolled in near the Cooper Road junction, thick and low to the ground. I turned on the hazard lights and slowed to 5 miles per hour. The fog pressed against the windshield like something solid. I kept driving. The fog cleared after 3 minutes. I continued to the overlook and completed the patrol. On Saturday night, I saw the child again. She was standing in the same place near the cable mill, wearing the same white dress. This time, when I drove past, she didn't follow. She just stood there, watching the truck disappear. I wrote it in the log. 11:54 p.m. Child observed near cable mill. White dress, no movement, proceeded per Rule 15. At 2 a.m., I went to count the flares. There were 22. I checked the log from the previous shift. Polk had counted 18. I removed 4 flares and carried them outside to the metal bin. The bin was half full of items I didn't recognize. A wool blanket, a pair of work gloves, a rusted lantern, a framed photograph face down. I placed the flares on top and went back inside. At 4:18 a.m., the lights flickered. I counted. 12 flickers, 12 was even. I ignored it. At 6 a.m., Cartwright arrived with another ranger I hadn't met before, a younger woman named Voss. Cartwright told me Voss would be training for the overnight shift starting the following week. You'll overlap with her on Wednesday and Thursday, Cartwright said. Show her the patrol route. Make sure she understands the rules. Yes, ma'am. Voss looked nervous. She was maybe 24 with short red hair and freckles. She kept glancing at the binder on the desk. Is it really that complicated? She asked. It's not complicated, I said. You just have to follow every rule exactly. Cartwright nodded. Harris is right. Do what the rules say when they say to do it. Don't improvise. Voss picked up the binder and started reading. On Sunday night, the power went out. It happened at 11:09 p.m., just as I was preparing to start my first patrol. The floodlights went dark. The radio went silent. The only light came from my flashlight. I waited 5 minutes, then went to the storage closet and found replacement bulbs. I climbed onto a chair and unscrewed the nearest floodlight fixture. The bulb was intact, not burned out. I replaced it anyway and flipped the switch. Nothing. I replaced the second bulb. Still nothing. I left them off per Rule 2. The station was completely dark now except for my flashlight. I turned on the truck and used its headlights to illuminate the gravel lot while I conducted my first patrol. At Abrams Creek, I heard the footsteps again. At the Methodist church, I heard the singing. At the Primitive Baptist church, I saw 2 raccoons sitting side by side on the steps. I returned to the truck immediately and drove to the Cooper Road junction. At the overlook, I heard the footsteps coming from the ridge, 6 sets again, synchronized, growing closer. I returned to the truck and continued. When I got back to the station at 12:51 a.m., the floodlights were on. I checked the bulbs. They were the same ones I'd replaced earlier. I checked the breaker box in the storage closet. Nothing had tripped. I noted it in the log. 11:09 p.m. Power failure, floodlights out, replaced bulbs per Rule 2, no result. 12:51 a.m. Floodlights restored on their own. At 1:45 a.m., I unlocked the northwest gate. No figures came through. At 2:15 a.m., I locked the gate and returned to the station. The rest of the shift was quiet. On Wednesday night, Voss arrived at 9:30. I walked her through the pre-shift check, showing her how to test the windows and locks, how to verify the radio was on channel 6, how to set the floodlights. "Do people actually follow all these rules?" she asked. "So if they want to keep working here." "But some of them are so specific, like, why does it matter if the gate is unlocked for exactly 30 minutes? "I don't know, but it does matter." She frowned, flipping through the binder. "Have you ever broken a rule?" "No." "What happens if you do?" "I don't know. I don't want to find out." At 10 p.m., we turned on the floodlights together. I showed her the equipment log, the storage closet, the metal bin outside. Then we got into the truck and started the first patrol. I drove. Voss sat in the passenger seat with the map on her lap. At Abrams Creek, I stopped and told her to walk 20 yards toward the water and listen for 2 minutes. She looked uncertain, but did as I asked. When she came back, she said, "I didn't hear anything unusual." "Good." At the Methodist church, she heard the singing. Is that coming from inside?" she asked. "Yes." "Should we check it out?" "No. We note it in the log and move on." She looked like she wanted to argue but didn't. At the Primitive Baptist church, I saw the man in the ranger uniform again. He was standing beside the road facing away from us. "Who is that?" Voss asked. "I don't know." "Should we stop and ask if he needs help?" "No." I drove past him at 5 miles per hour. In the rearview mirror, I saw him turn to watch us. Voss twisted in her seat to look back. "Don't," I said. She turned around, her face pale. We finished the patrol in silence. When we returned to the station, she asked to read the binder again. I let her. On Thursday night, she conducted the first patrol on her own while I stayed at the station and monitored the radio. She returned at 12:42 a.m., visibly shaken. "I heard footsteps at Abrams Creek," she said. "Did you stop walking?" "Yes, they stopped too." "Did you return to the truck?" "Yes." "Then you did it right." She sat down at the desk and stared at the binder. "What is this place?" she asked quietly. "It's Cades Cove. It's a ranger station." "You know what I mean." I didn't answer. I didn't know how to. At 1:45 a.m., I took her to the northwest gate. I unlocked it and told her to wait in the truck with me. At 1:58 a.m., the tall figure appeared on the path. Voss grabbed my arm. "What is that?" "I don't know." "Shouldn't we?" "No." We watched it pass through the gate and disappear into the trees. At 2:15 a.m., I locked the gate. Voss didn't speak on the drive back to the station. At 6 a.m., Cartwright arrived. She looked at Voss, then at me. She did fine," I said. Cartwright nodded. "Voss, you start your solo shifts next Wednesday. Any questions?" "No, ma'am." "Good. Go home and get some rest." After Voss left, Cartwright handed me another amendment sheet. 29. If you see more than one person in a ranger uniform during your shift, note their locations and appearances in the log. Do not speak to any of them. If they attempt to enter the station, do not unlock the door. 30. If the metal bin outside the back door is overturned, set it upright and do not examine its contents. If items have spilled out, leave them where they are. 31. If you hear a vehicle approaching the station between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., turn off all interior lights and move to the break room. Wait there until the vehicle leaves. Do not look outside. 32. And if the air inside the station smells like smoke but there is no visible fire, open all windows for 5 minutes, then close and lock them again. Do not investigate the source of the smell. 33. If you find the front door unlocked during your shift and you are certain you locked it earlier, exit the station immediately. Radio the dispatcher from the truck and wait for instructions. I worked through the rest of the month. The patterns became familiar. The footsteps at Abrams Creek, the singing at the church, the tall figures passing through the northwest gate, the scratching on the roof, the child in the white dress. I learned to anticipate them. I learned not to flinch. On the first Wednesday of my second month, Voss didn't show up for her shift. Cartwright called me at 8 p.m. and told me to cover both Wednesday and Thursday in addition to my regular schedule. I asked what had happened to Voss. "She's no longer with the Park Service," Cartwright said. "Did she quit?" "She's no longer with the Park Service," Cartwright repeated and hung up. I worked Wednesday night alone. At 3:15 a.m. during my second patrol, I stopped at the Primitive Baptist Church and heard the singing louder than before. It sounded like a full congregation now, dozens of voices. I listened for my 2 minutes and returned to the truck. On Thursday night, I found Voss's jacket in the metal bin outside the back door. It was folded neatly, her name tag still pinned to the chest. Underneath it was a notebook, the pages filled with handwritten observations. I recognized her handwriting from the training shifts, and the last entry was dated the previous Sunday. Unlocked the northwest gate at 1:45 a.m. 3 figures passed through. At 2:10 a.m., heard knocking at the station door. Answered it to see if it was another ranger. Door opened to empty lot. Immediately closed door and locked it. Knocking stopped. Remainder of shift uneventful. I placed the jacket and notebook back in the bin and went inside. On Friday, Cartwright told me a new ranger named Ruiz would start training the following week. "Will you be training him?" I asked. "No. You will?" I started to object, but she held up a hand. "You've been here almost 2 months. You follow the rules. You haven't had a single incident. That makes you qualified." "What happened to Voss?" Cartwright's expression didn't change. She answered the door. I didn't ask anything else. On Saturday night, I encountered a storm. It started just after midnight, heavy rain and wind that shook the station. The floodlights flickered but stayed on. The radio hissed with static, but I could still hear the dispatcher when she called for a radio check. At 1:45 a.m., I drove to the northwest gate. The rain was so heavy I could barely see the road. I unlocked the gate and returned to the truck. At 1:51 a.m., I saw headlights on the path. A vehicle was approaching the gate, a pickup truck moving slowly through the rain. I turned off my headlights and waited. The truck stopped just before the gate. The driver's door opened and a man got out. He was wearing a rain jacket and a baseball cap. He looked at my truck, then at the open gate. He didn't pass through. He got back in his truck, turned around, and drove back down the path. At 2:15 a.m., I locked the gate and returned to the station. The storm didn't stop. At 3:15 a.m., I started my second patrol, driving through rain so thick the windshield wipers couldn't keep up. At Abrams Creek, I heard nothing over the sound of the storm. At the Methodist church, the same. At the Primitive Baptist church, I saw the man in the ranger uniform standing in the rain. He was soaked, his uniform clinging to his body, but he wasn't moving. I drove past him. At the overlook, I parked and walked my 20 yards. The rain pounded against my jacket. I stood still and listened. I heard footsteps, dozens of them moving in unison coming from the ridge. I returned to the truck and continued. At 6 a.m., the storm broke. The sky turned gray, then pale, then the sun rose over the mountains. Cartwright arrived on time and reviewed the log. "Rough night," she said. Yes, ma'am. She handed me a new amendment sheet, this one labeled Emergency Protocols. 34. In the event of severe weather, high winds, lightning, flooding, remain at the station unless conducting a scheduled patrol. If conditions make patrol unsafe, skip the patrol and note the reason in the log. 35. If power is lost for more than 30 minutes, light 6 road flares and place them around the perimeter of the station, spaced evenly. Leave them burning until power is restored or until 6 a.m., whichever comes first. 36. If the station is breached, door forced open, window broken, lock compromised, exit immediately. Do not attempt to secure the breach. Radio the dispatcher from the truck and drive to the closest gate. Wait there until instructed to return. 37. And if you hear gunshots, move to the break room and turn off all lights. Wait in silence for 10 minutes. If the gunshots continue, radio the dispatcher. Do not investigate. 38. If you see fire in the woods, note the location and radio the dispatcher immediately. Do not approach the fire. Do not attempt to extinguish it. I read the protocols twice, then place the sheet in the binder. Ruiz started training on Wednesday. He was older than Voss, maybe 30, with a military bearing and short gray hair. He listened carefully to every instruction and asked no unnecessary questions. I showed him the patrol route. I showed him the northwest gate. I showed him the metal bin. "What's in there?" he asked. "Things that don't belong to the station." "Like what?" "I don't look closely, neither should you." He nodded and didn't ask again. On Thursday night, during his solo patrol, Ruiz encountered the child in the white dress. He drove past her without stopping and noted it in the log exactly as the rule specified. When Cartwright reviewed his log on Friday morning, she told him he'd done well. "You start solo shifts next week," she said, "Mondays and Tuesdays. Any questions?" "No, ma'am." She looked at me. "You're doing good work, Harris. Keep it up." After she left, Ruiz asked me how long I'd been working here. 2 months. "How long do people usually last?" "I don't know. I'm still here." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I worked security at a prison for 6 years. Saw a lot of things that didn't make sense. This feels different." "It is different." "How?" "At a prison, you know what you're guarding against. Here, you just follow the rules." He nodded slowly. "You and the rules work?" "So far." On my 3rd month, the pattern shifted. The tall figures at the northwest gate started appearing earlier, sometimes at 1:47, sometimes at 1:49. I adjusted my timing but kept the gate locked at 2:15 exactly. The singing at the Primitive Baptist Church grew louder. One night I heard words clearly for the first time. "Come to the water, come to the well." The melody was beautiful and sad. The scratching on the roof became more frequent. It happened at least once per shift now, always lasting between 2 and 5 minutes. I saw the child 4 more times. She never moved, never spoke, just stood at the edge of the road and watched. On the 2nd Wednesday of the month, I found new amendments in the binder. 39. If you see lights moving through the woods that are not headlights or flashlights, do not watch them. Turn away and continue your duties. 40. If the temperature inside the station rises above 80 degrees Fahrenheit and the thermostat is not malfunctioning, open all windows for 5 minutes, then close and lock them. Do not remove any clothing. 41. If you hear children laughing outside the station, do not look for the source. Note the time in the log and continue your duties. 42. If the clock on the wall stops, note the time it stopped in the log. Do not wind or adjust it. If it starts again on its own, note that as well. 43. If you find animal tracks inside the station, measure and photograph them if possible. Place salt along the tracks and radio the dispatcher. Do not attempt to follow the tracks. On Thursday night, the clock stopped at 2:37 a.m. I noted it in the log. It started again at 4:11 a.m. I noted that too. On Friday night, I heard children laughing. It started at 11:53 p.m., just before my first patrol. The laughter came from somewhere beyond the tree line, high and bright and sustained. It didn't sound joyful. It sounded wrong. I noted the time and started my patrol. On Saturday night, I found boot prints in the gravel lot. They weren't there during my pre-shift check at 9:45. I found them at midnight during a routine perimeter walk. The prints led from the edge of the lot to the front door, then back to the tree line. I measured the stride, 4 feet, 3 inches. I radioed the dispatcher. "Dispatch, this is 4732. Go ahead, Harris. I have boot prints in the gravel lot. Her stride length 4 feet, 3 inches. Prints lead to the front door and back to the tree line." There was a pause. "Acknowledged. Do not follow the prints. Complete your shift as normal. I'll notify Cartwright." "Confirmed." I went back inside and locked the door. At 1:45 a.m., I unlocked the northwest gate. 6 figures passed through this time, moving in 2 groups of 3. At 3:15 a.m., during my second patrol, I saw lights moving through the woods near the cable mill. They were white and steady, floating about 6 feet off the ground. There were 4 of them, moving in a slow circle through the trees. I turned away and drove to the overlook. On Sunday night, Cartwright met me at the station before my shift. "The boot prints," she said. "You measured them correctly?" "Yes, ma'am. 4 feet, 3 inches. She nodded, her expression grim. "We're adding a new protocol. Starting tonight, you'll conduct an additional perimeter check at 4:30 a.m. Walk the entire gravel lot with your flashlight and look for any new prints or disturbances. If you find anything, measure it and photograph it. Do not leave the gravel lot. Do not enter the tree line." "Yes, ma'am." She handed me a camera, a simple digital model with a wrist strap. "Use this. Upload the photos to the shared drive when your shift ends." At 4:30 a.m., I walked the perimeter of the gravel lot. I found new prints, smaller this time, maybe a child's. They led from the tree line to the northwest corner of the station, then back to the tree line. I measured them. The stride was normal, about 18 inches. I photographed them and uploaded the images at 6 a.m. On Monday, my day off, I drove to the library again. This time I searched for records of disappearances in the Smokies. I found dozens, hikers, campers, hunters, all gone without a trace over the past 80 years. None of the disappearances were connected to Cades Cove specifically, but the pattern was there. People went into the mountains and didn't come back. On Tuesday, I went to a sporting goods store and bought a better flashlight, a rain poncho, and a portable battery pack for my phone. I didn't know if any of it would help, but it made me feel more prepared. On Wednesday, Polk was waiting for me at the station. It was the first time I'd seen him since our brief conversation 2 months earlier. He looked worse, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. "Harris," he said, "you're Polk. I wanted to talk to you before my shift." "About what?" He glanced at the binder on the desk. "I broke a rule last week." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Which one?" "Number 4. I used the bathroom inside the station at 3 a.m. "Why?" "I had to go. I thought it was just a stupid rule. I thought nothing would happen." "What happened?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I saw something in the mirror. Not my reflection. Something else." "What did it look like?" "I don't want to talk about it." He rubbed his face. "I just wanted to tell someone, in case something happens to me. You should tell Cartwright. She already knows. She told me to keep working, to follow the rules more carefully from now on." "Are you going to?" "I don't know. I'm thinking about quitting." "You should do what you think is right." He nodded and left without saying anything else. I didn't see Polk again after that. The following Wednesday, Cartwright told me he'd resigned. She didn't offer any other details, and I didn't ask. Ruiz took over Polk's shifts. He was steady, reliable, and followed the rules without question. We overlapped occasionally when Cartwright needed coverage, but we didn't talk much. On the first night of my 4th month, I found a handwritten note tucked into the binder. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the ink faded. The note wasn't dated. It read, "If you've made it this far, you're doing well. The rules exist for a reason. Do not question them. Do not test them. Do not break them. What's out there doesn't care about your curiosity or your courage. And it only cares whether you follow the procedure. Stay inside the lines. Stay safe. The note wasn't signed. I placed it back in the binder and started my shift. At 11:30 p.m. during my first patrol, I stopped at Abrams Creek and heard the footsteps. I counted them this time, 8 distinct sets moving in unison. At the Methodist church, the singing had changed. The voices were lower, slower, almost like a chant. At the Primitive Baptist church, I saw the man in the ranger uniform. He was closer to the road this time, standing just 10 yards from the pavement. He turned his head as I passed, and I saw his face for the first time. It wasn't human. I kept driving. At the overlook, I heard the footsteps from the ridge, 12 sets now, synchronized perfectly. At the cable mill, the child was standing in the middle of the road. I slowed to 5 miles per hour. She didn't move as I approached. I had to steer around her to continue. In the rearview mirror, I saw her turn to watch me leave. At 1:45 a.m., I unlocked the northwest gate. 9 figures passed through, moving in groups of 3. At 4:30 a.m., I walked the perimeter of the gravel lot and found prints everywhere. Boot prints, animal tracks, small handprints pressed into the gravel. I photographed all of them and uploaded the images at 6 a.m. Cartwright reviewed them later that morning. "This is escalating," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Are you able to continue?" "Yes." "Good. I'm adding 3 more rangers to the rotation starting next week. You'll train 2 of them, Chen and Okafor. Ruiz will train the 3rd. "Yes, ma'am." She handed me another amendment sheet. 44. Even if you see more than 5 figures pass through the northwest gate in a single night, lock the gate immediately after they pass and do not return to it. Note the count in the log. 45. If you hear your own voice on the radio and it is not an echo or playback, turn the radio off for the remainder of your shift. Do not turn it back on. 46. If the gravel lot is covered in frost but the temperature is above freezing, do not walk on the frost. Conduct your perimeter check from the edge of the lot only. 47. If you see someone you know personally, family, friend, acquaintance, anywhere on the grounds between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., do not acknowledge them. Drive past and note their appearance in the log. 48. If the metal bin outside the back door is missing, do not search for it. Note its absence in the log and continue your duties. I worked through the rest of the month. Chen and Okafor were competent, cautious, and followed instructions precisely. Neither of them asked unnecessary questions. On the 3rd Wednesday, Chen encountered the child. He drove past her and noted it in the log. On the 2nd Thursday, Okafor heard scratching on the roof. It lasted 6 minutes. He moved to the break room and waited until it stopped. On the 4th Friday, I saw someone I knew. It was my father. He was standing beside the road near the Cooper Road junction wearing the same jacket he'd worn when I visited him in the hospital 2 months ago. He looked healthy, strong, younger than I'd seen him in years. I slowed to 5 miles per hour and drove past him. He smiled and waved. I didn't wave back. I noted it in the log. 12:03 a.m. A person resembling family member observed at Cooper Road Junction. Did not acknowledge per Rule 47. At 1:45 a.m., I unlocked the northwest gate. 11 figures passed through. I locked the gate immediately and returned to the station. The rest of the shift was quiet. At 6 a.m., Cartwright arrived and reviewed the log. She paused at my entry about my father. "You did the right thing," she said. I nodded but didn't speak. On Saturday night, I heard my own voice on the radio. It happened at 2:28 a.m. The radio crackled. Then I heard myself say, "Dispatch, this is 4732. I need immediate assistance at the overlook. There's been an incident." I turned the radio off and left it off until 6 a.m. On Sunday night, the metal bin was missing. I noted it in the log and continued my shift. And by the end of my 4th month, I had trained 6 rangers. 2 of them quit within their first week. One of them, a man named Torres, lasted 3 weeks before he stopped showing up. Cartwright didn't tell me what happened to any of them. Chen, Okafor, and Ruiz remained. They were reliable. They followed the rules. On the first Monday of my 5th month, Cartwright called me into her office, a small room at the back of the station I'd only seen once before. "Sit down, Harris." I sat. She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder with my name on it. "You've been here almost 5 months. No incidents, no violations, no complaints. Your logs are thorough and accurate. Your training has been effective." "Thank you, ma'am. I'm promoting you to Senior Overnight Ranger. You'll take over as primary contact for all overnight operations. You'll also be responsible for updating the operational guidelines as needed." "Yes, ma'am." She handed me a new keyring with 15 keys. Keys 14 and 15 are for the archive room and the secure storage locker. You'll need them to access the backup logs and emergency supplies. "Understood." She leaned back in her chair. "You've seen things here that don't make sense. You've heard things that shouldn't be possible. You followed the rules even when they seemed arbitrary or irrational. That's why you're still here." "What is this place, ma'am?" She looked at me for a long moment. "It's a ranger station in Cades Cove. It's part of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. That's all you need to know." "With respect, ma'am, I think I need to know more." She shook her head slowly. "No, you don't. The more you know, and the harder it becomes to follow the rules. Trust me on that." I wanted to argue, but I didn't. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains. "This place has been here a long time, longer than the Park Service, longer than the settlers. The rules didn't create what's out there. They just keep it contained. As long as we follow the procedures, we stay safe. The moment we stop, people get hurt. What happens to the people who break the rules? Some of them leave. Some of them disappear. Some of them stay, but they're never quite the same." She turned back to me. "Your job is to make sure that doesn't happen. To you, or to anyone you're training. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. You start your new duties tonight. There's a revised binder in the archive room. Familiarize yourself with it before your shift." I spent the afternoon in the archive room. The revised binder was thicker than the one I'd been using, maybe 60 pages instead of 30. The rules were the same, but there were additional sections. Incident reports from previous rangers, annotated maps of the cove with marked high-activity zones, and a list of emergency contacts I was instructed to memorize. I read every page twice. One of the incident reports stood out. It was dated 3 years earlier, written by a ranger named Bellamy. November 12th, 2:22 a.m. Heard knocking at the front door. Ignored it per Rule 11. Knocking continued for 7 minutes. Moved to break room as instructed. Knocking stopped. At 2:31 a.m. heard knocking on the break room door. No rule addressed this scenario. It remained in break room until 6 a.m. Knocking continued intermittently until 5:43 a.m. No damage to station. No evidence of intruder. Recommend amendment to Rule 11 to address secondary knocking locations. The amendment had been added 2 days later. At 9:45 p.m., I began my shift. The pre-shift check was routine. All windows and doors secure. Floodlights operational. Radio on Channel 6. At 11:30 p.m., I started my first patrol. At Abrams Creek, I heard footsteps. Too many to count. At the Methodist church, I heard the singing, louder than ever. At the Primitive Baptist church, the man in the ranger uniform was gone. In his place were 3 figures, all wearing the same uniform, all facing the road. I drove past them at 5 miles per hour. At the overlook, the footsteps from the ridge had stopped, and instead I heard a low humming sound, rhythmic and mechanical. At the cable mill, the child was standing with 2 others, both wearing white dresses, both with long dark hair. I drove around them and continued. At 1:45 a.m., I unlocked the northwest gate. 15 figures passed through. I locked the gate immediately. At 3:15 a.m., I started my second patrol. The loop road was darker than usual, even with the truck's high beams on. At Abrams Creek, I saw lights in the water, pale blue and steady, submerged just below the surface. At the Methodist church, I saw candles burning in the windows. At the primitive Baptist church, the three figures in ranger uniforms were standing in the middle of the road. I slowed to 5 miles per hour and steered around them. At the overlook, the humming had stopped. The silence was absolute. And at the cable mill, the three children were gone. I returned to the station at 4:29 a.m. and conducted my perimeter check. The gravel lot was covered in frost, even though the temperature was 53 degrees. I photographed it from the edge of the lot and went back inside. At 6 a.m., Cartwright arrived with a man I didn't recognize. He was older, maybe 60, with a weathered face and a Park Service jacket that looked decades old. "Harris, this is Superintendent Greer," Cartwright said. "He oversees all overnight operations in the park." Greer shook my hand. His grip was firm. "Cartwright tells me you're doing excellent work." "Thank you, sir. Walk with me." We went outside and stood at the edge of the gravel lot. The frost was already melting in the morning sun. "How long have you been here?" Greer asked. "In 5 months. And you've followed the rules?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question surprised me. "Because that's the job." He nodded slowly. "Most people can't do this work. They question too much. They push boundaries. They think the rules don't apply to them." He looked at me. "You're not like that." "No, sir." "Good, because what we do here matters. It's not glamorous. It's not well understood, but it keeps people safe." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" I hesitated. "I understand that following the rules keeps me safe. I understand that there's something out there that the rules contain. I don't need to understand more than that." Greer smiled faintly. "You'll do fine, Harris." He shook my hand again and left. Over the next 2 months, I settled into my new role. I updated the operational guidelines 3 times, adding new rules based on my observations and incident reports from other rangers. 49. If you see fire in the windows of any structure in the cove, do not investigate. Note the location and time in the log. The fire will extinguish itself. 50. If you hear music playing from inside a parked vehicle, do not approach the vehicle. Drive past and note the location in the log. 51. If the fog during your patrol contains shapes or silhouettes, do not slow down. Maintain speed and do not look directly at the shapes. 52. If you find fresh flowers placed on the station doorstep, leave them there. Do not bring them inside. Do not move them. They will be gone by the next shift. I trained 4 more rangers. 2 of them lasted. Chen was promoted to senior ranger on the daytime shift. Okafor took over 3 of my nights so I could work on administrative duties. The patterns continued. The footsteps at Abrams Creek, the singing at the church, the figures at the northwest gate, the child on the road. I stopped counting how many times I saw them. I stopped wondering what they were. I just followed the rules. On the first night of my 7th month, I found a new note in the binder. The handwriting was mine. It read, "If you're reading this, you've been here long enough to understand. The rules work because we follow them. They don't need to make sense. They don't need explanations. They just need to be obeyed. When you leave this job, and eventually you will, pass this on to the next person. Make sure they understand. Make sure they follow every word." I didn't remember writing it, but I knew it was true. And at 9:45 p.m., I began my shift. I conducted the pre-shift check. I turned on the floodlights at 10 p.m. I monitored the radio. I started my first patrol at 11:30. At Abrams Creek, I heard footsteps. I returned to the truck. At the Methodist church, I heard singing. I noted it in the log. At the primitive Baptist church, I saw the figures in ranger uniforms. I drove past them. At the overlook, I heard the humming. I listened for 2 minutes and returned to the truck. At the cable mill, I saw the children. I drove around them. At 1:45 a.m., I unlocked the northwest gate. 23 figures passed through. I locked the gate and returned to the station. At 3:15 a.m., I started my second patrol. At 4:30 a.m., I conducted my perimeter check. At 6 a.m., I completed the log and locked the station. The Cartwright arrived at 6:12 with a new ranger, a young woman named Parsons. "Harris, this is Parsons. She starts training tonight. Show her the procedures." Yes, ma'am. I handed Parsons the binder. Read this, I said. All of it, before your shift starts. She looked at the thickness of the binder and frowned. Is it really this complicated? No, I said. You just have to follow every rule exactly as written. Don't question them, don't test them, don't break them. What happens if I do? I looked at her for a long moment. I don't know. I've never broken one. She opened the binder and started reading. I walked outside and stood in the gravel lot watching the sun rise over the mountains. The air was cold and clean. Somewhere in the distance I heard a crow calling. I thought about the rules. I thought about the things I'd seen. And I thought about all the rangers who'd come and gone. All the people who'd followed the procedures or hadn't. I thought about the note I didn't remember writing. Then I went back inside to begin another shift.